So in 1546, a massive sculpture in marble, standing almost 10.5 feet tall, was unearthed from the ruins of the Baths of Caracalla in Rome. It depicts the Greek hero Hercules nude like an athlete to better show off his rippling musculature. His left arm is draped over a club, which crutches his armpit, and his head tilts lazily above it, which is to say, though built like a deity, he is very much a man. This is important because it would suggest to Renaissance humanist scholars that real people might once have looked this way. Now, imagine for a moment that you were one of those first people to uncover that sculpture. You would likely never have seen your face in a mirror. And the reason for that is that mercury-backed mirrors had just been developed in the 1500s, and they were wildly expensive, basically only available to royalty. And silver-backed mirrors are mass-produced in 1835, which is right about the time when fitness becomes somewhat more widespread than it was, before then. Before then, it was so rare as to be almost minuscule. You would also your encounters with other naked bodies would have been restricted to family members and some river bathers. And none of these people would have been the least bit physically developed. On the contrary, childhood diseases, poor sanitation, and possibly malnutrition would have left your countrymen scrawny. The fittest would have been sinewy and lean, but none would have trained musculature like the Hercules. Consider then the wonderment caused by this statue, which is known as the Farnese Hercules, after Cardinal Alessandro Farnese, who kept it in his palazzo in Rome. It would have appeared like a lost member of some alien race. It would have suggested heretofore unimagined possibilities for human performance and for human potential, really. And one measure of its impact was that the Hercules becomes the most reproduced of all Renaissance images. Both in sculptures and in etchings, it's widely reproduced. And in fact, last summer or 2 summers ago, there was a show in Milan that was all about reproduction in art in general, and the Farnese Hercules was center stage because it is the most reproduced statue, and it was reproduced this way because it was just astonishing to people. Through those reproductions, the Farnese Hercules would, over the next 400 years, have an enormous impact on the entire Western world's conception of beauty. And among that tiny segment of the population that was interested, on fitness and on our conception of the human body. One member of that tiny segment was Cardinal Farnese's physician, Hieronymus Mercurialis, who lived in the Cardinal's Palazzo in the 1560s. And he would have encountered that sculpture on a daily basis. And looking at it every day causes Mercurialis to get interested in ancient notions of fitness. And eventually he writes a treatise in Latin called De Arte Gymnastica Apud Ancientes in 1569. It's not the very first book on fitness written in the Renaissance. There's one Spanish one, but it is by far the most influential. That book, however, is a compendium of ancient Roman fitness practices and athletics, not ancient Greek fitness practices. And the problem with that is that ancient Romans thought about fitness much the same way that mid-20th century Americans thought about fitness, which is to say that they paid lip service to working out but didn't really do it that much. To me, nothing emblematizes our dysfunctional attitude toward effort more than weight machines. The prototype of today's pulley weight contraptions were invented in the late 19th century by a guy named Dudley Allen Sargent. And he was a ship carpenter's son with high social aspirations, and who went on in 1879 to become Harvard University's first director of physical education. And Sargent created his machines with the aim of mimicking, as he puts it in his autobiography, actions men in city life necessarily abandoned: reaping, mowing, pitching, raking, sawing, and shopping, but without causing the user to look like an actual laborer. That's one of the machines. We'll go back. Sargent, like many of his peers, believed that the bodies of working men were deformed by their efforts, asymmetrical and even weak. So he designed a series of variable resistance pulley weight machines to tax each muscle group in isolation and thereby restore balance and develop what he called perfect form. His idea was for the educated classes to labor at not looking like laborers. And Sargent's model of perfection was the strongman Eugen Sandow. And by the way, Sandow too was influenced by the Farnese Hercules. In his biography, he cast himself as a delicate child who had no notion of strength until he saw it in bronze and stone, when his father takes him to Rome and he sees sculptures like the Hercules and other Greek statues. Now, ironically enough, Sandow arrives at his admittedly magnificent physique the old-fashioned way, with free weights, gymnastics, and other functional exercise. But he's a canny businessman, and with a great gift for publicity, and he serves as a valuable spokesman for Sargent's machines and for the notion of muscle isolation. And in fact, Sandow develops bodybuilding. First, though, in 1894, he appears in the first commercial film footage ever produced. For several seconds, he flexes his arms and he dances around on stage. And the acclaim, fascination, desire, and money showered on this moving Hercules inspired the strongman to make physique posing the center of his act. And eventually, in 1901, in London, to inaugurate the world's first bodybuilding contest. And he does this by exploiting another new technology, the Kodak Brownie, which had just been developed and which allowed people to take cheap pictures. And for the first time, they're able to take pictures of themselves. He encourages people to take pictures of themselves and send them into his magazine, Sandow's magazine, which is a very successful magazine at the time. And so he's got the first selfies, and this is a great idea. But it also encourages people to think that you can that fitness can be measured primarily in terms of changes to your appearance. Now, bodybuilding won't become a widespread phenomenon for another 75 years, but when it does, the de rigueur tools of the gym are shinier, souped-up versions of Sargent's pulley weight machines. In fact, weight machines and bodybuilding mature together. They were marketed to bodybuilders, and then through the bodybuilders to the franchise gyms that proliferate in the 80s. So in the 1950s, a bodybuilder named Harold Zinkin invents the Universal machine. And then in the 70s, Nautilus machines come out, and they're marketed through bodybuilders. And I want to say first at the outset, I have nothing against the sport of bodybuilding. Bodybuilding's a very interesting sport, and it's very difficult, actually. What I'm saying is that the watered-down version of bodybuilding that you get in franchise gyms today is not an expedient or a very good thing for the mass or general populace to be doing. The fact is, functional strength demands the use of all those little stabilizing muscles that the machines bracket out of the process. When you and your wife want to move a sofa, you will not have a Smith machine to stabilize your back as you try and lift it from a squat. The second, and in my opinion, more pernicious way that weight machines make things easier is that they remove skill from the process. In fact, they were developed in part to allow untaught lifters to lift weights without acquiring difficult, time-consuming technical skills. Properly training with free weights requires some skill, while the Olympic lifts, those two lifts I mentioned before, the snatch and clean and jerk, are highly technical, demanding extensive long-term coaching to master. And it wasn't really until quite recently, again about the last 15 years, that significant numbers of people have begun to grasp the importance of skill-based work. It is through skill that we can recover some of that holistic mind-body approach of the Greek gymnasion. And also, I'd argue, the honor accorded to toil and effort. But also, high-skilled movements simply make you stronger than less skilled movements. A recent study from Magdeburg University in Germany on the best exercise for older people compared cycling and fast walking with dancing. Now, first of all, I want you to note that they're doing a study on strength, and they test cycling, walking, and dancing, because until the last 5 years, not a single study on strength actually used people who lift weights. That is the extent of the bias against strength in our culture, that there are no scientific studies done on muscle, basically, until, again, about 5 years ago. Anyhow, they found that of all of those things, dancing improved muscle strength in the legs far better than the other two. And this happens because by constantly learning new movements and new skills, we promote nerve attachments, which is to say more nerve interactions with the muscle. And when the more neural integration you have with a muscle, the more of the muscle you're able to recruit, and the stronger it becomes. And if you don't use them, if you don't promote neural integration, your muscles slowly atrophy, no matter how much lifting you do. When I practice the snatch, which is the most technical of weightlifting movements, it combines a pull with a push, or as my coach puts it, it's like throwing and catching it simultaneously. And that not only promotes neural integration in the legs, back, and shoulders, but it also increases the neural connections in your brain. It's difficult. So you're learning while you're doing it. You're getting sharper while you're practicing lifts like that. Now, combining learning with exercise in this manner causes profound adaptations that are not at all specific to or restricted to the lift itself. Doing so improves your memory, your coordination, your balance, and it's thought to promote neuroplasticity, which is that childhood state in which you're constantly refashioning your brain. It's what allows kids to learn languages quickly. Now, my version of the Farnese Hercules are Instagram videos of Olympic lifters performing extraordinary feats. 115-pound girls who can snatch 245 pounds and put 300 pounds overhead, neither of which I can do. Or women or men who each day try to outdo the impossible with the even more impossible. But the adaptations that allow you to do that don't come easily or quickly. They are sort of an ultimate form of delayed gratification. By recovering the ancient love of toil, by investing in the value of strain, we can be cognitively sharper, physically stronger, and more ethically attuned to the world. Learning new skills, trying to perform better, may or may not shape your body into your idea of perfection, but doing so will make you far better at living. It will shape your life.